There is always some madness in love, but there is also always some reason in madness. Friedrich Nietzsche. Sometimes we say, "I love you," but deep down, we're just afraid of being abandoned. Not because we don't feel something real, but because we confuse connection with survival. We think love is about holding on tightly, constantly, when sometimes it's more about letting go. Nietzsche wasn't against love. In fact, he understood it better than most. But he saw how easily love becomes distorted when it's rooted in fear rather than strength. He warned us that emotional clinginess isn't a sign of deep affection. It's a symptom of insecurity, disguised as romance. We don't always notice the shift. It begins subtly, with a need for constant reassurance, a fear when the other pulls away, a quiet panic when we feel unseen. We call it love, but is it? Nietzsche challenges us to ask the harder question. Is the love we offer truly about the other person, or about filling a void in ourselves? For him, love wasn't about losing the self in another, but about standing firm in your own being and choosing someone freely, not from fear, but from fullness. So before we romanticize the need to cling, we have to examine it. Because what if our need to be close is actually what's keeping us from true intimacy? This is what Nietzsche had to say about real love, and why emotional clinginess might be the opposite of it. To Nietzsche, love was never about merging into one being or losing yourself in someone else. It wasn't about becoming complete through another person, because that would suggest you were incomplete to begin with. Nietzsche's idea of love stood against the common romantic notion of two people dissolving into each other. Instead, he saw love as the meeting of two whole individuals, two strong, independent wills choosing to walk together, not out of need, but out of mutual admiration and strength. Love is not possession. It's a celebration of strength between two powerful individuals. Close quote. When love becomes a form of control, of sacrifice that leads to resentment, or of dependency that replaces personal growth, it has already stopped being love in Nietzsche's eyes. He believed that any relationship that demands you shrink yourself to keep the other close is rooted not in love, but in fear. Fear of being alone. Fear of facing life without someone to lean on. And worst of all, fear of facing yourself. Nietzsche believed love should fuel freedom, not smother it, that to truly love someone is not to ask them to become smaller, quieter, or less themselves, but to witness them in their full being and stand beside them, not over them. He saw love not as surrender, but as empowerment, a space where both people grow, think, challenge, and remain true to their own path. The moment you start bending who you are, just to be loved or accepted, you're not in love, you're in survival mode. He saw that emotional fusion, where your moods, your sense of self, your worth are entirely dependent on another, is not romantic, but dangerous. That's why he resisted the idea of romantic idealism, because love that comes from need often asks for sacrifice without growth, and Nietzsche didn't want anyone, man or woman, to be smaller for love. He wanted love to awaken something greater in you, not silence it. That's why he once wrote, "In every real man, a child is hidden that wants to play. That child isn't weak or immature. It's the part of us that is free, curious, light-hearted, unafraid to feel, and unafraid to be alone. When love strips us of that playfulness, when it makes us heavy with guilt, anxiety, or fear of loss, it no longer frees us, it traps us. And that's not love. It's dependency wrapped in poetry. True love, to Nietzsche, was about freedom and fire, about choosing someone not because you're empty without them, but because with them, your fire burns brighter. It was about protecting your individuality, not surrendering it. And if being with someone costs you your peace, your power, or your sense of self, then what you're holding on to isn't love, it's fear disguised as intimacy. That's the core of Nietzsche's vision. Love that liberates, not love that limits. A space where two people, fully alive in their own right, choose each other without chains, without masks, without losing the child inside. Nietzsche never romanticized attachment. In fact, he warned us that what we often call love is just the ego trying to secure its own safety. For him, attachment wasn't an expression of emotional depth. It was a strategy, often unconscious, to control, to possess, to bind the other to our expectations. When we cling too tightly to someone, when their distance fills us with panic, or when we try to mold them into who we need them to be so we feel secure, that's not love. That's control wearing the mask of affection. It's not about the other person's freedom or truth anymore. It's about our fear of being alone, of being unchosen, of being invisible. Nietzsche saw through that. He saw how emotional clinginess often grows not from the soul's longing for union, but from the ego's dread of abandonment. In other words, we don't always want someone because we truly love them. We want them because their presence keeps us from facing the discomfort of our own emptiness. And so, we call that attachment love. But in reality, it's often a quiet form of domination. We demand constant attention, reassurance, presence. We take up space in their life, not to grow together, but to soothe something in ourselves we haven't yet faced. Nietzsche called this out with brutal honesty. The demand to be loved is the greatest of all arrogant presumptions. Think about that. To demand love, rather than offer it freely, is to place ourselves at the center, to turn a connection into a transaction. True love, in Nietzsche's view, cannot be demanded or possessed. It must be chosen again and again, without pressure. But modern relationships often drift in the opposite direction. We invade each other's space, demand updates, expect the other person to complete us. We get angry when they need solitude, or when they don't respond the way we imagined they should. We become smaller versions of ourselves to keep them close, or worse, we make them smaller so they don't drift too far. That isn't love. It's fear mixed with ego. It's the child in us grabbing what we think we need to survive. And Nietzsche's philosophy was never about survival. It was about transcendence, about becoming the fullest version of ourselves, even in the midst of vulnerability. For him, a relationship should be a dance of freedom, not a contract of control. He believed that every human being must face themselves first, stand strong in solitude, before they can love another without trying to own them. Love, if real, leaves room for breathing. It honors the other's space. It watches without gripping, supports without suffocating. If you constantly need someone to prove their love, to soothe your doubts, to fill your emotional hunger, you're not in love, you're in fear. And fear, when it drives closeness, always corrupts it. So when Nietzsche speaks of love, he speaks of strength, a kind of selfhood that doesn't vanish in a relationship, but deepens. A connection where two people choose each other, not out of desperation, but out of mutual freedom. To him, the highest form of love was one where control had no place, only reverence. Where both people could walk beside each other with open hands, not clenched fists. So if you find yourself clinging, ask why. Not to judge yourself, but to understand what you're really afraid of. Because until you can let go of control, you can't truly hold someone with love. And Nietzsche reminds us, love that demands isn't love at all. It's possession in disguise. For Nietzsche, love was never meant to be the place where we dissolve ourselves. It was never supposed to be an escape from who we are, but rather an extension of our inner strength. He didn't believe in losing oneself for love. He believed in becoming more of yourself within it. Real love, in his eyes, wasn't about two halves completing each other. It was about two whole individuals walking side by side, neither shrinking to fit the other's shadow. When he spoke of love, he tied it to power. Not power as dominance, but power as self-possession. The ability to stay rooted in your own being while still choosing another, freely. He believed that the greatest relationships are those that allow both people to grow stronger, not smaller. If your love costs you your voice, your truth, or your identity, Nietzsche would say that's not love. That's self-abandonment disguised as devotion. The moment you begin molding yourself into what someone else needs so they won't leave, you've already left yourself. And Nietzsche feared that more than heartbreak. He feared the quiet erosion of the self that happens when we mistake emotional dependency for intimacy. True love to him wasn't about merging, it was about mirroring strength. Being with someone who sees your wildness and doesn't try to tame it, who doesn't fear your independence but honors it, someone who doesn't need to cage you to feel close to you. Nietzsche reminds us that love without freedom becomes a kind of prison, and many people unknowingly trade their individuality for the illusion of closeness. They silence their desires, compromise their boundaries, and shapeshift to hold on to someone who was never meant to carry that much of their soul. But what if love isn't about being held tightly, but about being seen clearly and still chosen? That kind of love requires courage. It demands that both people come into the relationship already standing on their own, not needing to be rescued, not needing to be filled, but simply wanting to share the fullness they already are. Nietzsche's ideal relationship wasn't a rescue mission. It was a fire between two flames. He believed that when love is real, it doesn't ask you to disappear. It dares you to show up fully. And in doing so, it becomes something sacred, not needy, but electrifying. The opposite of this? Emotional dependency. That slow-burning need to be validated constantly. That fear of losing someone so intense that you lose yourself first just to prevent it. Nietzsche would call that fear, not love, because real love does not survive on fear. It thrives on freedom, and freedom means allowing the other to evolve, even if that evolution sometimes leads them away. It means you don't chain someone to you. You walk beside them, both of you facing the world as equals. So, if you ever find yourself wondering if you're loving someone, or simply trying not to lose them, ask, am I still whole here? Or have I slowly become a version of myself that exists only to keep this love alive? Nietzsche's voice cuts through that confusion with clarity. Don't lose yourself to keep love. The moment you do, it's no longer love. Hold that line close, because the most dangerous thing isn't losing another, it's losing yourself in the name of keeping them. Nietzsche believed that love, if it is to be true, must begin not with longing, but with wholeness. Not with a desperate search for a missing piece, but with the quiet strength of a self already complete. He didn't romanticize the idea of finding your other half. In fact, he warned against it. To Nietzsche, that kind of love, built on the idea that we are incomplete without someone else, is fragile by nature. Because anything built on need will eventually collapse under its own weight. He taught that the only love worth having is the one that is chosen freely from a place of inner fullness. He who cannot stand alone is not ready to be with another. That one line captures the heart of his view. If you lose yourself the moment someone enters your life, you weren't truly standing in yourself to begin with. So what does loving without losing yourself look like? It starts with being radically honest with yourself. Are you loving this person, or are you just afraid to be alone? Are you drawn to their soul, or to the way they distract you from your own emptiness? These are not easy questions, but Nietzsche didn't believe in comfort. He believed in clarity, and clarity demands that you strip away illusion. It means being able to tell the difference between connection and dependency. It means realizing that true love isn't about merging, but about meeting. Two sovereign individuals, both capable of being alone, yet choosing to be together. That's a very different kind of love than what most of us are taught to expect. It's not about being completed. It's about being witnessed, challenged, and respected in your wholeness. That kind of love doesn't ask you to shrink. It demands that you grow. And yes, it will sometimes hurt, because to love without clinging means you have to let go of control. You have to let people be free, even when it scares you. But in that letting go, you create the only space where real intimacy can live. Nietzsche believed that loving yourself was not arrogance, but necessity. He taught that your first loyalty must be to your own development, your own truth, your own becoming. Only then can you truly love another, not from hunger, but from strength. So how do you build that kind of love? You begin by asking yourself, am I here to give, or just to receive? Am I standing in my power, or borrowing someone else's? You stop using love to fill the silence inside you. You learn to sit with that silence and listen to what it wants to teach you. And most of all, you stop chasing relationships that require you to abandon yourself, because Nietzsche's deepest lesson is this: the more you love yourself as a free being, the more capable you are of loving someone else without chains. And that kind of love? It doesn't fade. It doesn't cling. It doesn't beg to be held together. It stands tall. It breathes. It inspires. And it lasts, not because it has to, but because it chooses to. We've reached the end of this video, but maybe the beginning of a deeper way to see love. Nietzsche didn't reject love. He simply stripped it of illusion. He challenged us to look beyond the soft language of romance and ask, is this love, or is it fear wearing a mask? Emotional clinginess often disguises itself as devotion, but more often than not, it's the ego's quiet panic. The fear of being left unseen, unloved, unchosen. That's not love. That's survival. And Nietzsche, in his brutal honesty, asked us to rise above survival, to stop building relationships on neediness, and start building them on strength. Because real love, love worth having, can only exist between two individuals who are whole, who are free, who are not afraid to be alone. Love, then, is not about completing each other, but about celebrating each other's completeness. So if you've ever felt that love meant losing yourself, shrinking, or abandoning your truth just to be accepted, Nietzsche would tell you, that was not love. Real love doesn't demand your disappearance. It invites your expansion. It doesn't break your solitude. It honors it. So here's the final truth. Don't lose yourself to love. The one who truly loves you won't let you.